This is Dr. Tom Roselle. After 35 years of practice and almost 750,000 patient visits, the Roselle Center for Healing knows what works and knows how you can take control of your health and wellness. My team of doctors practice 21st century integrative medicine. Whether you suffer from chronic pain and fatigue, allergies, or headaches, we can help. Take charge of your health before it's too late. Make an appointment today. Call 703-698-7117 or visit online at rosellecare.com.
Dr. Tom Roselle and the Roselle Center for Healing present Ageless Health 2014, Proven Tools to Maximize Your Health, Saturday, October 18th at the Fairview Park Marriott in Falls Church, Virginia. At this all-day seminar, learn how you can feel better or feel great when the doctors from the Roselle Center for Healing each discuss a topic that directly affects your health, like your food, physical fitness, preventing injury and disease, your healing process, and more. Learn more at agelesshealth2014.com. That's agelesshealth2014.com.
Dr. Tom Roselle live right now on 105.9 FM and AM 630 WMAL.
Welcome to Dr. Tom Roselle Live. This is Dr. Tom Roselle live in studio. It's beautiful outside. We finally got a little reprieve. It's a little cool, but, guess what? Take it while you can get it, guys, because who knows what's coming down the pike. Give me a call, 888-630-9625, 888-630-9625. Love to talk to you on any subject that you have in mind. Perhaps you've tried, you've done everything you could, you've searched and come up with the same old nothing that works like it's been working. No way, no how, no way to get it done. But we're going to do something for you today. We're going to talk about a subject that is far more pervasive than anybody possibly thinks and is getting more so all the time. And it has to do with stuff that you put in your mouth. Obviously, that could be anything. Well, the one thing that we do too much of is called grains, carbohydrates. 60% of our diet or more is made up of wheat or wheat products or grains of some sort, and they're causing significant devastation in your health. But to talk about that, somebody who is near to dear my heart, but somebody who's an expert in the field. Sue, are you there?
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, actually, it's afternoon.
It's afternoon, actually.
Yeah,
but.
Yes. Anyway, so you can't be in studio today, but, given everything else that's happening in our house, no wonder. But we're going to talk about a spin-off of Alan Perlmutter's book called Grain Brain, but we're going to talk about the piece of it relative to gluten intolerances, and all the things that it can cause, from headaches to constipation to mental problems, even bipolar activity. Forget about just not being able to think, but people who are anxious and depressed, and the list goes on. It's horrible.
It does.
Let's start with simply, telling our audience what gluten is, and then we're going to get into obviously why it's a problem and so forth and so on.
Well, the name gluten actually comes from the Latin word glue.
There was a commercial like that, wasn't it? It was just talking about glue. They were talking about
casein at that point. But this time we're talking about gluten. And it's basically the stretchy component of the grains, predominantly wheat, rye, oats, barley, spelt, kamut, that makes those grains, when you grind them into flour, into bread, keeps the flour stuck together. And it's what makes our bread fluffy. It's what makes our muffins fluffy and that sort of thing. But the problem is that gluten that we now consume is a very different form than what originally was grown about 10,000 years ago.
Well, the problem is that we're seeing more and more people go down the tubes with it, and you know as well as I do, you deal with the nutritional end of our practice. When somebody comes in and we test them either by laboratory testing or by neuromuscle function testing relative to sensitivities, we know there's an across-the-board pattern of sensitivities, allergy reactions, toxins, and you can have one without the other, and that becomes a whole juggernaut of complexity, which we'll get into and kind of dissect it a little bit today. But why is gluten such a problem when it's natural in so many foods?
Well, for one thing, it's not the same thing that we used to have, okay? About 1960, they changed the way they hybridized and somewhat genetically modified the grains that we consume today. And what they've done is altered that form of gluten to a form that our bodies haven't a clue what to do with. And so that starts the whole cascade of problems to begin with. We're eating a substance that genetically and historically none of us are really able to cope with very well to begin with. Plus the fact the way that we prepare our breads and bread products today is very different. When breads were originally done, grains were soaked or they were sprouted or they were fermented, and just doing that alone would take away some of the things that would be irritating to people's digestive tract.
But not all of them.
No. It'll take away phytic acid and lectins, which are things that make it hard to digest when you sprout or ferment or soak the grains. It does not remove gluten, however. And there's a lot of people under the conception that if you soak the grains, the gluten goes away. It does not. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is the flours that we use today are very, very much different than the traditional flours. And in fact, if you go to some countries where they still have the original old types of grain.
Well, you call them ancient grains. I've heard you say that to patients repetitively.
Yeah.
But
They're
what does that mean?
the ones that have not been modified by modern techniques of hybridization and that sort of thing. Many times people will tolerate those, even people who have the disease celiac, which is a very severe version of gluten sensitivity.
Well, is that what happens when people go to Europe and they say, I can eat things there all the time. I didn't feel bad. I felt good. I come back here and I'm flat on my butt again?
Exactly, because they're not getting the amount of gluten and they're not getting the modified versions of the gluten that we have in this country that make it so much more difficult for us to digest and to utilize. And they did it because it increases the crop production, but unfortunately it's a type of wheat that is not nearly as nutritious as it used to be, lacking a number of minerals and also much more difficult to break down. And so when you've got something that's brand new like this, and brand new being since 1960, our bodies haven't adapted to it at all.
And there's a lot of resistance relative to recognition from the medical community in traditional healthcare.
Well, and again, it goes back to the fact that the medical people are not trained in dietary effects on disease and health. And their design and their education is based on disease diagnosis and molecules that will correct that or cure it or whatever. And this is not a disease that can be cured by a medicine. This is a sensitivity to a substance that's foreign to our bodies. And as long as we continue to put it in, we are going to continue to have the inflammatory reactions that we get from our immune system going crazy over something that it shouldn't have in its body.
Well, it's an autoimmune, if you will, inflammatory cascade, which causes so many different things to show up. And I think what people don't understand, and what we've tried to show them in the office, is that pain patterns, joint patterns, muscle ache, not only the typical migraines and headaches, congestions, things that don't go away, but also the very severe degenerative conditions of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and MS, we seem to be on a upward spiral with these things, and they're linking more and more of the literature to gluten.
They are, and the thing about it is, traditionally we would think of any kind of a food that was not agreeing with the body as causing a problem with the digestive tract. But what they're now discovering, and this is why there's such a big hype, if you will, about the gluten issue, is the fact that gluten can cause inflammation in the body for a number of systems. And it's not just digestion, it's not just musculoskeletal, it's also neurological, because our poor brains don't have the ability to block out the inflammatory reaction that our body creates to something that it doesn't want. And so now we're getting the obvious diseases that you just mentioned, but we're also getting some of these weird neurological syndromes where they don't really fit a category and they can't figure out what's wrong, and they've got, they're trying different medications that used to work on specific diseases, and they're finding that they're not as effective.
Well, there's a term out there called pseudotremors.
Yeah. Well, it's not a disease. That's the thing. It's brought on because the body is going to war with itself. And when it does that, specifically the immune system, it creates an entire inflammatory process that crosses across all barriers that our body may put up, including our brain, which is the thing that's so scary, because gluten is everywhere. It's not just in the obvious things. I mean, we're using gluten in the most weird places like mascara and hair conditioners.
Yeah, but how about feeding our fish? You know, everybody thinks that if they go eat fish, you know, they're getting their omega fatty acids and they can make their heart safe and so forth. And actually, in some situations, the opposite is actually true. Unless they're getting wild-caught in clean water types of fish, you got a problem.
Well, and then there again, it goes into a whole different story, a whole different program where what you feed the animal is what you're getting yourself when you eat that animal. And what is that impact having on our bodies that are genetically still ancient from the standpoint of our evolving into modern technology with all these new techno foods, if you want to put it that way?
Well, our ancestors who used to eat free-range beef and free-range this and wild-caught that with tons of vegetables, it's even difficult today to try to get anything that's pure, because if they're eating beef, unless it's organic free range, it's been corralled and it's fed grain.
Right.
If you get fish and if it's farm raised, they're being fed grain. If you're not getting organic vegetables, then Monsanto's had its finger in it, and they're spraying it with things Roundup, if you will, and that's called glyphosate, which is the gluten trigger.
Exactly. In fact, they're even hybridizing stuff with the Roundup in it.
I know.
I should say
bioengineered?
Bioengineering. Thank you. So, you know, we've got a very, very sticky wicket here, because it's almost impossible for people, unless they're very, very vigilant, to completely avoid gluten. But the problem is, gluten sensitivity is on the rise because of this experiment we've had, so to speak, in the last 35 years of the high complex carbohydrate diet. What people don't realize is that whole wheat bread has a higher glycemic range than a Snickers bar.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me. You know, and if you get you line things up and you talk about sugar and you talk about fruits and you talk about white bread. White bread has a much higher level of glycemic trigger than any of those other things do. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there and say, well, I'm avoiding all these other things, but that's where the cravings come from. That's where all of that nonsense, so, your list of wheat and rye and barley and spelt and kamut and bulgur, people say, well, those are supposed to be good things. They're supposed to be good for me. You go back to bread being the staff of life. Not so much. That was thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Like 10,000 years ago. That's when grains were beginning to be grown as an agricultural product. The problem that we also run into with this is the fact that our bodies, whenever they start having a sensitivity to something, creates an immune reaction which sets off certain chemicals that are kinds of chemicals that actually can cross into the brain and go right to our reward center, okay? The same center that addicts us to social drugs and to alcohol and to things like that. These chemicals caused from the gluten products go in there and hit that reward center. Well, that's a really powerful center because it gives you a feel-good feeling. I felt good when I ate that scone. I'm going to go back and have another one. And eventually, with enough exposure, a person can actually become addicted to the grains themselves. I mean, you've run across people and you say, "You mean I can't have my bread?" And they just flip out.
Oh, if you take a patient that comes in our office who has a pain pattern and they have an inflammatory cascade, we always put them through allergy testing and allergy desensitization the way we do it neuromuscularly. And then these people look at this stuff and they say, oh my God, how am I going to do this? It just doesn't make sense. We're going to get into that because that allergy piece, that addictive piece is profound. I want you to kind of keep that on your brain. We're going to come back. Our number here is 888-630-9625. That's 888-630-9625. Sue Roselle is my guest. We're talking about gluten sensitivity. We'll be right back.
Educate, engage, empower. Take control of your health with Dr. Tom Roselle and the Roselle Center for Healing. Information is power. Achieve an ultimate state of wellness with Dr. Tom Roselle's Education Lecture Series video on demand. Discover how to create an extraordinary life of optimal health and wellness. Visit drtomroselle.com/education. That's drtomroselle.com/education.
Did you know that routine mammograms can increase radiation exposure to breast tissue 1,000 times over a chest X-ray? Now consider a simple, non-invasive, and totally safe medical procedure approved by the FDA since 1982 that can detect breast cancer 5 to 8 years before it can be visualized on a mammogram. Infrared thermographic imaging can accurately detect the initial signs of breast cancer as increased blood supply and metabolic rate, which is recorded as heat. Why expose yourself to radiation when accurate and safe medical detection is available? Call the Thermography Center of Fairfax to schedule a breast exam today at 703-948-7248. That's 703-943-7248. For more information, visit www.thermographyscan.net. That's thermographyscan.net for the Thermography Center of Fairfax.
The Roselle Center for Healing is a proud supporter of breast cancer awareness and reminds you to conduct a monthly breast self-examination and a thermographic breast scan as part of your annual wellness checkup.
Dr. Tom Roselle and the Roselle Center for Healing present Ageless Health 2014, Proven Tools to Maximize Your Health, Saturday, October 18th at the Fairview Park Marriott in Falls Church, Virginia. At this all-day seminar, learn how you can feel better or feel great when the doctors from the Roselle Center for Healing each discuss a topic that directly affects your health, like your food, physical fitness, preventing injury and disease, your healing process, and more. Learn more at agelesshealth2014.com. That's agelesshealth2014.com.
Dr. Tom Roselle Live continues now on 105.9 FM and AM 630 WMAL.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Tom Roselle. You're listening to Dr. Tom Roselle Live. Yes, I'm in studio. 888-630-9625. That's 888-630-9625. Love to talk to you. Sue Roselle's online with me, and we're talking about gluten sensitivity, intolerances, reactions, and I think you're going to be amazed how many places it comes from. You know, Sue, one of the things that really irritates me is that occasionally I like a glass of good red wine. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you had asked me 3 years ago, I would have told you, you know, to the question, does wine contain gluten? I would have said, absolutely not. Categorically, no. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that wine does contain gluten, and it can have it from a couple different sources, which really irritates my bottom side. But nevertheless, we have to be aware of it. There are organic wines that don't have that, and if you want to be totally clear that there's nothing in your wine, or you have to go to the manufacturers, see if it's organic wine, see if there's been any cross-contamination that would allow that to be, but they're using it as a filtering agent.
And
a stabilizer. And I'm saying, why in God's name would you mess with something? I mean, we're already throwing sulfites in it. Yeah,
I know. Well, I think it's important for people to understand a little bit more about the gluten issue. It's extraordinarily good for food processing because of its glue-like system. So if you want to use it to stabilize, it keeps things from separating. If you want to use it to filter, it helps to trap things and get it out, but it leaves a residue into the substance that's been filtered. So that's where you get it. But gluten isn't a single molecule. It's actually two different things. There's one called glutenins, and there's one called gliadins. And these two molecules combine to form the substance that we're calling gluten. And this is where we get into our problem, because the glutens that are used, we don't know which one is being used in all these different food products. Obviously, whichever one works the best for their source. Those things that give the best texture, keeps gravies from curdling, and sauces and things from separating and so forth. You don't know which one it is, and you don't know whether or not you're sensitive to the gluten as a whole or one of its components. And the gliadin itself is actually 12 different units. So you could have a sensitivity to one or two of those 12, but not realize that that's what it is.
And also, you have to have an immune system that actually responds to the test to be able to pick it up in many cases.
Exactly. So, I mean, when we check people for gluten, and if they're showing a reaction, they could be responding to one of any 13 different substances contained in that particular product.
But does it matter?
It doesn't matter, no, exactly, because regardless, it's going to create the same situation. The most severe response to gluten is celiac sprue, which is the disease where the gluten has caused so much irritation and the immune system has attacked the intestinal tract. And that's the thing that most people are the most familiar with. What we're talking about here is not the celiac sprue disease, because people who have that generally know it. They have significant digestive issues, lack of absorption of nutrients, and so forth.
So there's a piece that I learned, and it was probably about 7-8 months ago, that I really didn't understand completely. I suspected it with a lot of our patients. People will come in and say their mouth is hot, or their lips will be very red and they'll be blistered, or they say, I just can't put the fire out. And there was this article that I read in one of the nutrition journals that had been documenting celiac conditions, and they called it that it was a mouth celiac disease.
Exactly.
And I'm saying, wow. I said, that answers a lot of questions across the board with some patients who we've had a hard time putting the fire out with. Occasionally they cheat, and it's like pulling the blister off, if you will, off the tissue. It just never heals.
It never heals. And actually, they suspect that as many as 1 in 4 people are vulnerable to some form of a gluten sensitivity. And those
so 25% of the population, that's huge.
Yeah. And about the people who have Northern European ancestry are the ones that are particularly having a problem with this, but it can be anybody. And as soon as your body encounters one of these substances, whether it's a glutenin or one of the 12 of the gliadin or any combination, that sets up an entire sensitivity pattern, which not only might harm the gut, but it may also go to different places. It can go to the skin. It can go to the mouth, as you said. It can create the headaches, and it can create a lot of other neurological situations and never bother their gut. And that's where it's confusing, because people think, well, if I eat gluten, I'm going to have bloating and gas.
Well, they've been educated to think that it's either celiac or Crohn's disease, or at best case scenario it might be a colitis or an ulceration of some sort, but they don't relate those things. So we're coming up to the middle of the show here, so we got to take a break, but we're going to follow this thread through and see if we can get our listeners to understand why we're so rabid, if you will, on this. 888-630-9625. This is Dr. Tom Roselle.
Are you dental phobic? Do you neglect your dental health because of fear and anxiety? A beautiful smile begins with exceptional dental care, and you can trust in the expertise of Soft Touch Dental Care and Dr. Michael Chung. Soft Touch Dental Care is unlike any dentist office you'll ever experience. Their warm and welcoming environment is designed to soothe fears and anxiety the moment you arrive, and they're especially pleased to pamper their honored guest patients. Dr. Michael Chung is a professional and leading expert in all areas of comprehensive dentistry, including cosmetic, sedation, neuromuscular, TMJ, and implant dentistry. Offering state-of-the-art technology, Dr. Chung can give you the smile of your dreams. Arrange for a complimentary consultation today with Dr. Michael Chung and experience the expertise that makes Dr. Michael Chung so unique. Call 703-319-6990. That's 703-319-6990. Or visit bestinsmile.com. That's bestinsmile.com.
If you're looking for the best in natural health, wellness, and green living products, shop the Roselle web store on Amazon.com. You'll find a variety of products and resources that are designed to help achieve an ultimate state of health and wellness. Shop the Roselle web store on Amazon.com today. Visit drtomroselle.com and click on Roselle web store. That's drtomroselle.com and click on Roselle web store.
Dr. Tom Roselle Live continues now on 105.9 FM and AM 630 WMAL.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Tom Roselle. You're listening to Dr. Tom Roselle Live in studio, 888-630-9625. That's 888-630-9625. Love to talk to you on any subject. We got a fascinating one. It's called gluten intolerance, but more importantly, how it's affecting your brain, your immune system, and all of those things. Before we get back into the program, and Sue Roselle's on the line with me, we're kind of battering back and forth. I want to invite all of you to Ageless Health 2014. It's going to be October the 18th at the Fairview Park Marriott Hotel in Falls Church, Virginia. This is our 13th year in doing this program, and we change the topics every year. My entire staff presents. I start out as keynote. Actually, before that, during registration, you're going to be introduced into the art of core training exercise by Erin Roselle Poe. And she'll do some demos, she'll get you involved a little bit, and then we go into the day. We break, we have some vendors. At noon, we're going to provide for you an organic lunch. And the Chinese Martial Arts Institute in Merrifield, Virginia is going to do one of the most beautiful presentations of Tai Chi Chuan. Then we go back in, and midday we break again, and then I end up showing you how to put together all these pieces so you can take it home the very next day and use that. Join us. Right now, you have about a month, 5 weeks to register to get a $59 rate. We actually are losing money on that, but this is so important to us that we educate you. We want you there. So go to rosellecare.com, and it should be listed right there in front of you. You can check the presentations. You can see where it's at. You can see what the costs are. And it's a one-step, one-day that will take you to where you want to go the rest of your life. It's an amazing presentation. Sue, you're going to be there, and obviously you present every year. Do you know what your topic is yet?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the problem that people have with belly fat.
Oh, you're going to talk about grains again, huh?
Why they can't get rid of it. Well, that's part of it. But there's a lot of other factors into why we gain belly fat. And no matter how hard people try with their exercise and their diets, they cannot get rid of it no matter what. And that's one of the things that is confounding to so many different people because they're trying hard to do all the right things and they're getting no results.
Yeah, it's that bloat. You know, I was listening the last 2 days to an interesting tape series on parasites, something that I had tucked away in my archives of boxes of stuff, and I've been going back through them. As a matter of fact, it's so old, it's on a cassette form, and I got to figure out how to put it over into CD or get it on a thumb drive. But thank God I still have a cassette player. But anyway, I was listening to this thing, and, you know, you talk about belly fat and extra pounds and, you know, pulling 18, 19-pound tapeworms out of people. It's really disgusting, but that also is part of what we're talking about. Let's go back to the topic. It's a little easier on the digestive system, and so we don't ruin everybody's lunch. Before we get to it, there's an interesting call. And give us a call today at 888-630-9625. I'm not sure where this is it, but we're going to talk to him anyway. Kurt, thank you for calling. How can we help you, sir?
Hi, I've taken over the family farm in southern Maryland, and we have been considering what organic products that we're going to plant there, just like my grandfather did. And I'm wondering what strains of wheat are we referring to that would be pre-1960 wheat so that we can grow something that doesn't have this nasty gluten in it.
Actually, there are 3 different kinds. I don't know if you can find them. One is called Emmer, E-M-M-E-R. One is called Einkorn, E-I-N-K-O-R-N. And one is Kamut, K-A-M-U-T.
Well, great. I'm sure I can find that, whether I find it here or in Germany or somewhere else.
Probably you can find it in Europe. I don't know if they're available. I think Kamut is probably available here, but I don't know if it has been modified. Kamut and Spelt are 2 varieties of wheat that have a lower gluten content naturally anyhow. And because they are not mainstream grains, they're often in the specialty products and tend to perhaps, and I have to say that with a capital P, not have been hybridized or genetically modified to increase the gluten content. The grains that we grow in this country today are what they call a short wheat, and it takes less space to get more yield from the crop, and that's one of the reasons that they're using it. but that particular version doesn't have as many nutrients, and it also has a much higher level of the gliadin and gluten and content that we're talking about today.
Kurt, what you're basically looking at with modern grains and the stuff that's widely available here is a forced hybridization instead of a natural pulling of the best strains and grains, and putting them together. Unfortunately, to even position it even much more specifically, there are very few countries anymore that will allow anything that's grown in the United States to be exported. It's a situation where we're step by step killing ourselves thanks to the changes that Monsanto and company are putting together and forcing and really taking over the political economic playing field of the agricultural industry, and that's what the end product is. It's changing DNA strains within the human population and within animals. They don't want it over there, but we sure as heck allow it here.
Absolutely. Monsanto is a dirty word to most farmers, whether they use the products or not. Yeah. It has to do with the fact that they're industrializing the entire farm agriculture society.
Right. They're taking away the small farmers that used to do traditional farming methods that produce such wonderfully healthy and nutritious foods.
Kurt, I applaud you and your effort, to try to make organic substances the primary focus of your farm, and keep doing that and do your homework. It's out there. Understand the dupe that's being played upon many farmers today. Sue, I want to ask you a couple questions. One is simply this: is everybody sensitive to gluten at some level or not?
It's a good possibility. They estimate that most everyone has some genetic connection that is going to have a problem with one of the many factions of gluten. And just as a aside to the comment I just made about the ancient grains in spelt and kamut, if a person has a gluten sensitivity, I wouldn't even recommend them trying to use those grains either, just because you don't know which component there is. There are some blood tests out there now. Obviously, they have the tests and the biopsy for small intestine to see whether you have celiac, but that's a different test than when you're checking for the antibodies to glutenins and to the 12 factions of gliadin. And I don't know if all the labs are equipped to test for all those different things.
No, they're actually very hard to find. There's one of our laboratories that we use that we send patients out if we're not sure, particularly if, and how I interpret, I like to use salivary testing simply because it's what's actually affecting tissue right now. And, we do what's called an IgA antibody test, and then we do a gliadin IgA, and that's the gluten piece that we're trying to identify. But here's the situation that I tell patients is that if that gliadin test comes back and it's very, very, it's a low stimulation, so we're talking, let me back up. If the IgA antibody comes back, and I'm making up ranges now, the laboratory runs, the old criteria were 25 up to 60 units was normal. And that's what you needed to protect yourself between bacteria and viruses and toxins and so forth. But say it came back at 10, and the gliadin antibody came back at 8, which is underneath the tolerance level. Then I look at patients and I say, you really do have a gluten sensitivity. And they say, how can it be? That's negative. I said, no, because you already have 8 units in 10. If you take that 10 and take it up to normal, which we'd have to do 2.5 times that just to bring it to the lower threshold, which is 25, you have to do 2.5 times that 8, and now you're at 20. Now you're super gluten sensitive.
Exactly.
And that's how you have to interpret these tests. And unfortunately, most physicians, take a look at this and, it's not a problem. But there are.
If you're in the range, you're okay.
Correct. And that's not okay. And that's not the way it is.
That's their approach. But that approach is good for 97% of the population, supposedly. But it doesn't wean out the 3% that obviously don't fit into that pattern, and an awful lot of other people above and below the 50% mark.
Sue, hang on a second. Marie, are you there?
Yes, hi there. Yes, I wanted to know what the difference is between herbs and teas, because I thought a lot of teas were herbs. And also, is there any organization like FDA, CDC, they're wrong, that would govern them being, safe to take?
You want to handle that, Sue, or you want me to?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, so you're asking, are peas and herbs?
I want to know what the difference between herbs and teas are. Some things are herbal that you buy. They say
herbal tea is made from various types of flowers and herbs. And there's zero caffeine in those types of products. They could be chamomile or mint or lemon or something like that. A tea that is made with green tea, white tea, or black tea is not considered an herbal tea because it contains a substance that has caffeine in it, namely the tea itself, all right? And so anything that has a white, green, or black tea component to it cannot be labeled an herbal tea.
So let me ask, are herbs totally zero caffeine, or like decaffeinated teas, are they zero caffeine?
No, decaffeinated tea still has a trace of caffeine in it.
Yeah, zero's not zero.
Small. But herbal tea has zero caffeine because it's made from substances that contain no caffeine naturally.
Is there any safe organization that can deem them to be safe? It's wrong to say FDA or CDC, but that we take these things and believe that the manufacturer is making some organic something rather as good.
Marie, the only thing that you can count on in this country is that if on the package itself it has the FDA organic label on it, and it's a circular label. It says organic, FDA, parts green, parts white, and if it's stamped on it, then it's approved as an organic product. If it says organics and it doesn't have that label, it's not 100% organic. It's derived from organic type of products. It says natural products. It's definitely not organic. It's from a natural substance grown in the ground. It's all about marketing and positioning of these things. So the only way that you can tell that it's an organic substance and it's safe from pesticides and that sort of situation is that it has the organic. Now, here's something we were talking about the other day. Even if your vegetables are labeled organic, we're finding out that they're being sprayed, particularly your fruit. Now, we'll set the vegetables aside. Let's talk about fruit because that's the article that we read. If it says organic fruit, we're finding out that being sprayed with antibiotics to kill out a bacteria that supposedly is taking over the crops. So even with an organic fruit at this point, and particularly apples, you have to make sure that you wash them, use an acetic acid, white vinegar, to wash your fruit, and then you're probably in a better situation. But unfortunately, that's the deal. Sue?
And if I could jump in here, the one thing about the USDA label, like everything else that we seem to have in this country, it's getting watered down. So it is not even as guaranteed as it used to be. There is a place online that you can go to that is a nonprofit organization. They're not beholden to any company, called Environmental Workers Group, EWG.org. And they have a pretty clear insight, and they do incredible amount of research into all of our food substances and household products that we have, health and beauty aids and so forth. And they'll give you pretty much the down and dirty on the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So I want to, we got about a minute, and we have to take a break. I want to touch upon cross-contamination.
Yeah.
When you're sensitive to gluten and there's other things you're going to be sensitive to, or if you're sensitive to something else, you're going to be sensitive to gluten.
Yeah, if you have something that says made in a plant that also processes and it has gluten and a whole litany of other things, it just means that they may be making other products on the same machinery that they're using for the gluten-free products, and there can be some contamination. Or you can have contamination within the facility itself where, the air circulation is blowing molecules of flour and so forth into other products that don't have the flour but will have some of the residue of that. And that's what those labels mean at the bottom of things. When you see that, if you have a serious sensitivity to a gluten or any other substance and you see one of those substances listed in...
Sue, hold that thought. We have to break. This is Dr. Tom Roselle. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Dr. Tom Roselle. You're listening to Dr. Tom Roselle live in studio. We're always here every Sunday, 12 noon, bringing you the most up-to-date and intimate information on integrative and alternative health care. whatever bugs you, this is the opportunity to find out another path, an alternate path. My guest today, Sue Roselle. We're talking about gluten intolerance and crossover contamination. So let's pick that up again, because going back to things like wine, even if you didn't filter it, they use a gluten product to help seal the wooden casks that they ferment the wine in.
Because its name is glue.
That's right. That's exactly the deal.
Being a consummate bookworm, before we get off, I'd like to give 2 books, if people are interested in following up this, that are very well documented and very scientifically based. There's a lot of stuff on the internet that's good, but there's also a lot of stuff that's questionable. The one book is The Grain Brain by Dr. Perlmutter, Perlmutter, but if they just look up The Grain Brain, they'll find the book. That one connects not only gluten to problems with the body in general and autoimmunity and the gut, but it also talks to a great degree specifically about the neurological impact of gluten sensitivity and the inflammation that it causes on the brain cells themselves and what comes from it, like the degenerative disorders and things that are not identified by a specific diagnostic code, that are just weird, vague things. So, also emotional stuff.
Who wrote The Grain Belly?
The Wheat Belly?
The Wheat Belly, that's it. I was
Dr.
close.
William Davis.
See, your brain works.
That's the second book. Wheat Belly is the second one. So Grain Brain and Wheat Belly are 2 excellent resources for this that are written by very legitimate and very scientific docs in the field. Dr. Perlmutter is a neurological physician, and I believe Dr. Davis is a gastroenterologist, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, David Perlmutter. God, he's going to kill me. I've met David so many times over the years. And, brilliant guy, very, very with it, understands the intimacies of functional medicine. Get the book. It really is excellent. You know, I'm sitting here, Sue, and I'm looking at the screen, and it's lighting up. And you guys got to call during the program, not when we got less than a minute before we have to sign off. It's like craziness. This is not good. Sue.
Well, I just wanted to throw out also some of the other places that people could come in contact with gluten besides the obvious things. And this is what's scary: cosmetics, lipsticks, medications, non-self-adhesive stamps and envelopes, Play-Doh, shampoos, conditioners, and vitamins.
Well, that's how they used to make Play-Doh, was with, you could make it at home with water, wheat, salt, and right.
Salt and flour and water.
Yeah,
and
it also made good plaster Paris. You could fix holes with it.
It's what we used to make for homemade paste.
Just think what it's going to be doing in your gut.
Exactly. And there are some ingredients that are also code for gluten. Hydrolyzed vegetable protein is one. Vegetable protein, HVP. Yeast extracts, natural flavorings, modified food starch, maltodextrin, brown rice syrup.
So I'm going to make you post all this because you don't have time to get through it right now. So
no, I know. That's just to give people an idea that when they're looking at a packed or product, canned or bagged
I'll
product,
see you in about 20 minutes. I'm coming home and you're done. I'll see you a little bit later this afternoon. This is Dr. Tom Roselle. See you next week. Bye.
Dr. Tom Roselle and the Roselle Center for Healing present Ageless Health 2014, Proven Tools to Maximize Your Health, Saturday, October 18th at the Fairview Park Marriott in Falls Church, Virginia. At this all-day seminar, learn how you can feel better or feel great when the doctors from the Roselle Center for Healing each discuss a topic that directly affects your health, like your food, physical fitness, preventing injury and disease, your healing process, and more. Learn more at agelesshealth2014.com. That's agelesshealth2014.com.
This is Dr. Tom Roselle. After 35 years of practice and almost 750,000 patient visits, the Roselle Center for Healing knows what works and knows how you can take control of your health and wellness. My team of doctors practice 21st century integrative medicine. Whether you suffer from chronic pain and fatigue, allergies, or headaches, we can help. Take charge of your health before it's too late. Make an appointment today. Call 703-698-7117 or visit online at rosellecare.com. This is Dr. Tom Roselle, author of Ageless Health. Health is a do-it-yourself program. My book, now also available in audio version, is a step-by-step program of how to take control of your health and wellness without drugs or needless surgery. You have the capacity to change your health and level of well-being. Take control of your health today and order Health is a Do-It-Yourself program.
For more information and to order, please visit agelesshealthbook.com. That's agelesshealthbook.com.